Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of OhioX's Tech Tour. We're really excited to be in Ashland today, and we're joined by not just four, but actually five individuals, a couple from Ashland City Schools, which we're very much looking forward to hearing more about what's going on at the school district level. There's a ton of information out there with COVID and how technology and innovation is really shaping how our school systems are educating students and future leaders of tomorrow. But I'm your host, Chris Berry. I'm the president of OhioX. We're a statewide technology and innovation nonprofit organization. The Tech Tour, which is our first, because we're a newer group, as I mentioned, is a statewide series designed to highlight and promote great technology and innovation that's happening in cities all across Ohio. This is the 10th, or that we have 10 events throughout the series. This is our 9th. Last week we were in Portsmouth, Ohio, so Southern Ohio, right on the Ohio River. Next week we'll be in Dublin, a suburb northwest of Columbus. And it's been great. We've talked to leaders from diverse backgrounds, from people that are in Fortune 500 publicly traded companies down to startups and everything in between. And it's been a ton of fun to learn about the great technology and innovation work happening across our state. Our goal is that hopefully we can learn, we can share. People, maybe there are some people on this chat today that are from Ashland that can hear about a company or an organization or an idea they weren't familiar with, but also we think we know there's people across Ohio that will be joining. So hopefully this is maybe the first or second time they're hearing about some of the work happening in Ashland. So we're really excited about this, and certainly because of COVID, it's all virtual, which has really opened up the possibilities for people across the state to join us when perhaps in the past they might not have been able to. To start, I want to thank our event tour sponsor, HMB, for their support. HMB helps mid-market companies and governments innovate and grow using cloud platforms and automation. HMB believes you don't have to have a bottomless IT budget to reach your full potential. If you're interested in learning more about HMB, you can visit their website at hmbnet.com. Without further ado, I'm going to do a quick introduction of our guests today, and then I'll turn it over to each of them to say a few words about who they are and what they're doing. Elad is up first, and he is the Dean of the Dausch College of Business and Economics at Ashland University. He's been a CEO, a CMO, he is a tech investor. He's also a higher ed entrepreneur who has worked across not just the United States, but across the globe in Israel and other places. And his work at Ashland has been really impressive to see, especially with the MBA program and the business school. One of the things that I've enjoyed the most learning about over the past couple of years of getting to know him is their international MBA program and the work it does connecting Ohio, Ashland, with companies and leaders across the globe. So Elad, thank you so much for being here. And if you could perhaps maybe share us a little bit about your work and some of the background I didn't get to.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. I'm thrilled to be a part of this. And as soon as you started organizing OhioX, I reached out and wanted to see what we can do, both as a business school, a university, and also individually. I appreciate the introduction. It wasn't actually a typo there. I did specifically spell it as intrapreneur as opposed to an entrepreneur, when you're in higher ed. Or in any organization, it is an interesting position to be in and a state of mind to be in as an entrepreneur within an organization. So I saw that term. I wish I had coined it, but somebody else had coined it, and I thought it was a direct and very accurate and apt description of what it's like to be an entrepreneurial person inside an organization. Hence, intrapreneur. Academic intrapreneur is how I define myself. The business school and the university in Ashland and Ashland itself see us ourselves as a central foundation in the ecosystem around us, really expanding all the way down the state to certainly to Columbus, where we have a university center, all the way up to Northeast Ohio, and I'm sure we'll talk about it some more. And as you said, we have undergraduate business programs and an MBA program, in fact, one of the largest MBA programs in the state, and a lot of integration with technology, and we see ourselves as a pipeline of talent to our stakeholders.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you for being here. And yeah, as you had mentioned, Elad and Ashland have been great partners from the start of OhioX, and I thank you for that and your friendship and helping us build this out and being an active leader in that. So thank you so much. Next up is Dr. Elizabeth Groeber, who is Senior Director of Laboratory Sciences at Charles River Laboratories. Charles River is a global company that provides products and services to help expedite the discovery, early stage development, and safe manufacturing of novel drugs and therapeutics. She's a senior director with 20 plus years in pharmaceutical analysis, spanning innovator pharma and CROs. And she's currently the position in the lab science. She leads the team for lab sciences, Charles River, Ashland, with full responsibility over 5 departments, collectively providing analytical support for innovator drug discovery and development programs. Beth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be invited to speak. And I feel it's an honor because there are so many people involved in technology within our facility here in Ashland, but across all of Charles River. So being able to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart on behalf of our organization is great. Yeah, just a little bit more about myself. So I actually am a native of Columbus and graduated with my PhD from Ohio State in chemistry. Launched off on an adventure around the United States. I went to Texas and worked at a CRO down there for about 7 years. Then went to Pfizer in Connecticut, worked inside their research labs for 9.5 years. But then, like so many Ohioans, the call of home says, I got to go back. There's things to do, people I love there. So in 2013, I jumped back and kind of the winds connected me with the Ashland facility here. I still am in Columbus almost every other weekend. I think of it as my second home, maybe my first home, to be honest. But yeah, so the work we do here, it's not going to be hard. It's going to be hard for me to avoid talking about the fact that we do safety testing. And that means that there are animal models that we're working with, and it's incredible research that we do on behalf of our sponsors, just contract research. So there's outsourcing across the whole of the business spectrum for doing this research outside of the innovator shops. We also have many virtual companies and then everything in between. So the degree to which they have these labs in their shops has completely collapsed over the past decade, 2 decades. So we're critical machinery in developing drugs and safe chemicals. The majority of what we do is pharmaceutical related, about 75%. The rest is related to the agrochemical industry. And in fact, we've gotten involved in some of the new e-cigarette and vaping work as well. So we do a number of that testing here. Lab sciences is the testing arm of a lot of this work. It's everything from, CGI is the CSI, where you have mass spectrometry and novel techniques. But we really do work with the sponsors to figure out what kind of assays they need. They're constantly changing. We know that just even in the era of COVID, there's whole new types of therapies that are coming out that require new assay approaches. We evolve very rapidly in order to meet those demands. It's really our lifeline, because if we don't, our competitors are going to soak up that work. We have to stay at the cutting edge of what's going on with technology in order to really stay competitive. So the branch here in Ashland is about 150 people, and that's spanning several disciplines. We'll talk about that a little bit in more detail later on. But all of them have anything from chemistry degrees to biology, engineering. It's a really nice span. And we're kind of hidden here. If you're going up Main Street and you look to the left, you'll see this airplane hangar looking building. It doesn't look like much, but then if you actually take a tour, people's eyes are just popping with the amount of stuff we have going on here. So anyway, thank you and happy to be here.
Thank you, Beth. Next up, we have 2 gentlemen from Ashland City Schools. First is Steve Paramore, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and Operations, and then Ben Spieldinner, Director of Innovation. Excited this is not just the first 2-person team from one organization that has joined us, but also our first school district and K-12 perspective that we've been able to have join us, which is great because, as I was kind of mentioning at the beginning, so much going into K-12 and just training future leaders of tomorrow, whether it's at universities like Ashland or in the K-12 scene. to make sure that Ohio has the workforce that can be a leader in technology and innovation. So Steve and Ben, thank you so much for being here, and would love to hear a little bit more about your all's work at Ashland.
Thanks, Chris. We're kind of, what an opportunity to be the first school district on here. We are a pre-K through 12 public school in Ashland, Ohio, and we service 3,200 students. Obviously, March 12th, when the governor sent his order out, we spent from March 12th until June 1st in a remote setting, which obviously that put into play the amount of technology that the resources that we had throughout our district to get those out to students and distribute those and have them dropped off. But our way of life changed tremendously as we're used to doing things inside facilities for the most part. And typically, if you don't go to a public school, you're either at a parochial school or you're homeschooled. So now all of a sudden everybody became homeschooled, and we had to utilize technology to the utmost to reach every one of our students. And then you also have students with disabilities where they're guaranteed by the federal government certain amounts of time that they need to have face-to-face. So with that said, we have roughly over 300 employees that work in our district, both support staff and educators, as well as administrators. We have Ashland High School, we have Ashland Middle School that services grades 6 through 8. Our high school services grades 9 through 12. We have an intermediate building, Taft Intermediate, which services 4 and 5. And then we have 2 primary buildings in our district, one of which has a preschool, and that goes up to 3rd grade. And then we have one that's just kindergarten and 3rd grade. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben a little bit to introduce himself. I have been in this district for 17 years, which is all of my career. I was a physical education teacher at the elementary and high school level, and became a building administrator at Ashland Middle School, and took the role as assistant superintendent with human resources and operations January 2nd of 2020. So this is it's been an exciting year. It's been a new year for me, and our district has responded tremendously to the world we live in now. So I'll let Ben talk a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm kind of new to this position. I was an English teacher for about 20 years. This is my 16th year here in this district. I taught English almost the entire time. Last year I started as an educational technologist. We saw the need coming to be able to support teachers, particularly at the high school and middle school level, in terms of their technology use. And then of course, once COVID hit, that all ramped up pretty much exponentially. And so then my role changed to, I guess, being kind of the quasi lead for remote learning, and kind of helped shape kind of what that looked like. More recently, though, we've jumped into using a platform called Canvas, and so my role has been both setting that up as well as training teachers in how to use Canvas, and then ultimately too best practices for remote learning. And then how to best facilitate both face-to-face and remote learning as well. So I've been in this position now since July 1st. So it's called baptism by fire.
That's what I was thinking, that hearing both yours and then also Steve's newer to the role, which yeah, I'm sure it's been an incredible experience.
So we're excited to be on this today, because technology is at the forefront of what we do now. Not only in our face-to-face, which we're blessed to be able to do now, even amongst the pandemic, but also to service our students that decided for whatever reason to stay home and work remotely.
That's great. Well, thank you for being here, Steve and Ben, and fascinated to hear more about some of the work that you all are doing. Lastly, is Aaron Rasmus, IT Systems Engineer at Sentec Systems, LLC. Sentec is an IT services firm working in managed IT and support, cloud services, VoIP, system data, security, and more. He helps implement, support, maintains, and manages IT services, including networking, IT security, email, disaster recovery, telecommunications. Aaron, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks, Chris, for that great introduction. Just listening back to it, I think, gosh, do I really do all that stuff? And I guess That's the truth. I do. So, Aaron Rasmus, systems engineer from Sentec Systems, and we really specialize in taking big business technology and analytics and right-sizing it for small to mid-sized business, local governments, and local nonprofits. So our main focus is within the local community and just helping businesses become more profitable and more productive. I was not always an IT person. I actually started my adult career as a ditch digger in Las Vegas, and I quickly learned that education was important. So it's an honor to be on with all these great educators and minds. And shortly after that, I began as just an IT systems analyst, very self-educated out in Las Vegas. And it was around that time that I met a beautiful young woman, and I promised her fame and fortune and world travel for starters. And lucky for me, she bought the whole thing. And she moved me to a little town called Loudonville, Ohio, which is right in the Ashland footprint. And this was back in 2007. And at that time, I was very heavily vested in trying to find something technology to do. But there wasn't much. So I got involved with a call center company, started working as a site director at a call center. And then a friend of mine founded Sentec Systems. We partnered up. I thought, what a better way to bring my IT and my call center technology to market. And ever since then, we've been providing these types of systems and analytics to small businesses all in the area.
Well, thank you, Aaron, and welcome, and thank you for joining us. To start, and we've kind of touched on this in a few of the introductions, but I'd like to dig more. We typically start with a lot of our tech tours around COVID and just what that's been like. And we've talked about some of the challenges and just the realities of shifting homeschooling, home working. But Elad, would love to start with you. What has it been like? We're upon a new school year for Ashland, but then just some of the work that you're doing, because you don't just work with undergrads, you also work with professionals that are doing MBAs. And so just what that's been like and some of the challenges and opportunities that you've seen these past few months.
Yeah, we could probably fill more than an hour with the stories we have to tell. Steve was talking about March 12th. I remember March 13th because I was heading a large group of MBAs on an international study tour, and we were in Spain and Portugal on March 13th. And you can imagine what it was like to be there as the pandemic was developing. We traveled there in the first place as part of our international MBA program that you referred to before, which includes 2 international study trips that are fundamental for the MBA level education, and we can talk about that later if we have time. Point is, we're there with a large group of MBAs, faculty and staff, and that was our baptism by fire, getting everybody home first. If you remember, March 13th, the president was on TV making an announcement that no one can enter the United States. He forgot to mention that U.S. citizens could. And for the first few hours, that was interesting, trying to see how we all get back. So that was our baptism by fire in terms of the MBA. And you can imagine since then, we obviously have put our international trips on hold. We canceled our May trip right after March, and then the October and November trips for this year are canceled as well. And the innovation that we developed there, international study tours in a virtual format, are something that I hope I have time to talk about because it really is quite an innovation, and we were pushed towards it by COVID specifically. Although I told my team we should have thought about this before. And so that's on the MBA side. On the undergrad side, everybody reads about not just school districts, and I can't wait to hear what Steve and Ben have to tell us about how they've accommodated, but also college campuses. In fact, I think there's a concern nationally about college campuses and about college-aged students and their behavior during this pandemic. And as a campus, we have decided to come back to campus on a residential basis with a lot of safeguards in place. And so we kicked off the semester this past Monday on the 31st, and socially distant, wearing our masks, making sure that we're all stronger together and safer together. And that's going to be an interesting challenge to see as well. But as a general statement, we didn't have, from going to face-to-face to remote, online, hybrid, and mobile, we didn't have an issue. And that's something that I'm trying to convey to any conversation that we have about this, like today. I've been teaching online for 20 years. And I think our industry, in self-criticism, we're not necessarily the most nimble and quick to adjust industry. It was comfortable for many of us to keep teaching face-to-face like we've done for millennia, really. And so all of a sudden March comes around and you hear and read about schools, universities, colleges that have to adjust quickly, that have to transform their face-to-face content into online content. And you hear about the stress that causes in faculty that can't or won't or are having difficulty doing it. That didn't happen at the College of Business and Economics in Ashland University, because we've been doing that for years. We've been delivering and developing our content for years online, not in anticipation, obviously, of a pandemic. No one could have anticipated that, but only because the technology begs for that. Not to mention the target audience, and our target audience, I'm one of the few people that gets older on campus. Everybody else is 18 to 22. And so our target audience changes and demands things that are different than they were 5, 10, certainly 20 years ago. And so technology, way before the pandemic, was on the forefront of our minds in terms of delivering content and in so many other ways.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a good point to go to Steve and Ben, and knowing both of you are newer into these roles. So not only are you in some ways, and I assume, Ben, you might probably be the first person to hold this position at the district. So you're kind of learning and developing, but then you're thrust into this situation where complete, the way you all operated, especially I assume in the spring, was completely turned up on its head. So anything that Elad was sharing that you kind of wanted to add on from a K through 12 perspective?
Yeah, I'll let Ben talk a little bit about the remote learning and how that kind of morphed into getting better and better each and every day from March to June 1st. Our school year ended June 1st, but what we had to deal with as a school district per se was not only are we just a school district, we provide food to our students. We're on a federal lunch program where we have breakfast and lunch that we give to several kids either at a free or reduced level. And what we did is we opened up ourselves even when it wasn't necessarily cost effective to feeding families just as much as educating them. So we kept our classified staff working in the buildings the entire time as our certified staff, which was our teaching staff. They stayed home and prepared remote lessons. So we kind of serviced our community twofold, where we were using our classified staff to prepare meals, our transportation staff to deliver those meals, and our paraprofessionals that would typically be either in a clinic or in a classroom. And they were on those buses that we would take out and deliver the foods. And we used technology to make sure that we didn't miss anybody. We used the Remind 101 system that many of our teachers use, many of our building principals use, for those families to notify us, yes, we would like those deliveries. So from a larger scale with a non-education part of the education industry, we were able to service our students and our families that way. So we were really proud of that. But I'll let Ben speak to how we got better each and every day with our staff members that were at home remotely learning and preparing lessons to teach our students from pre-K through 12.
Yeah, so we have been slowly kind of building our infrastructure. Once again, not necessarily in anticipation of anything like this, but just as time has progressed, we've put more resources into purchasing computers and looking at various pieces of software and those kinds of things. And then we've also put more resources towards training teachers how to use those things. So we've been a Google Suite for a good number of years. Probably maybe 5 or 6 years now we've been a Google school. And so we've had access to the Google Suite for a number of years, and that included Google Classroom. So we had a infrastructure built not necessarily for this. And so what we did first was we tried to transform what our teachers have been using face-to-face into something that they could use remotely. And then we also then had to look at how teachers were going to do this, delivering it themselves remotely, not having their classrooms and access to those kinds of things. So teachers were taking home their document cameras and their computers and those kinds of things. And then for the first time, we had many teachers who were embarking on this idea of recording videos. And so that was really kind of a cool evolution to see. We see teachers kind of move that direction. And then as the year progressed, we saw teachers become more and more comfortable in front of their computer screens, both recording themselves for direct instruction as well as on Google Meets and video conferencing and those kinds of things. It was really neat to see teachers innovate ways that they would do different activities that at first seemed you could only be done face-to-face, but then they'd come up with really creative ways to do these kinds of things and remotely. Some of them involved the kinds of technology that we think of in terms of computers and electronics and those kinds of things. Others were more simple forms of technology where we had teachers, for example, that were delivering science lessons where they were having students microwave eggs to learn how to learn about waves. And so that was kind of a cool thing to see, that evolution, to see how these educators really transformed the way that they saw their classroom. And a lot of these teachers had seen their classroom, as something that was beyond just the school day itself too, where they were providing things online for students to be able to access outside of the school day, but nothing quite at this level. And so we saw a huge transformation in teachers, and then they did an absolutely amazing job, pre-K all the way up through 12th grade, in terms of how they delivered their content electronically, how they learned how to assess electronically, how they learned how to not only learn, but how they were able then to deliver this kind of content in a way that was still interactive for kids. Even if it wasn't live interaction, it was still video showing kids how to do some of these things that they would have normally done in class. And so a lot of that was facilitated through Google Suites. A lot of that was facilitated through Google Meets, Google Classroom, those kinds of things. We had a lot of teachers using outside resources, outside websites to help better facilitate the kinds of things that they were doing remotely. And then our goal here recently then has been to take all of those kinds of outside resources and kind of throw those all into Canvas now. So it's been a combination of watching the teachers evolve how they taught, and then use that evolution then to try to shift the vision of where we're heading now.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And Beth, I would be curious, you work for a global company, and so there's probably a lot that goes into just preparing and dealing with it from that perspective, but then also with the line of work you're in, it's probably not as easy as sending employees home sometimes with just a laptop and logging on remotely, like I can do and a lot of people can do. But some of that physical presence that's required for some of the work that you all are in. So curious what it's been like at Charles River.
Sure. So I want to preface it by saying that there are some companies that have seen some upside to their business from the whole situation with COVID. As an example, we know one of the testing companies, Thermo Fisher, has doubled their stock price in the past 8 months just because they are involved in the PCR testing that's going on for COVID. We're not quite that good, but we actually do have a stock price that's higher than when we went into this in the March timeframe, speaking to the idea that we are really considered to be still essential. So to that point too, when the whole thing started to hit, we got all letters in our cars that we carried around signed by our department heads that said we were essential workers. And so it basically gave us that ability to, make some kind of claim should we have been stopped, what are you doing? So we all did figure out who was essential on site. It wasn't everyone. There are core staff that can't do their job remotely. but then there are some that can be remote. So we've adopted technologies, the remote login, accessing of files and servers, doing things through chat like this. We have, in addition, we have tons of conferences that run all year long. I mean, these are science-based individuals. Those have all gone virtual, so that's been really neat to see. I think that's going to revolutionize the way that conferences are held, because previously you had to take the flight, book your hotel for a week, and only exclusive number of people could pay that much money to send their people to conferences. So that's an exciting potential long-term benefit. But overall, across all of Charles River, North America, Europe, Canada, we really did think first safety. So we started adopting policies right away that amped up our cleaning, mask wearing, social distancing, getting people spread apart, taking advantage of those people that could work remotely to use their space to pull people apart. And then where we had to have people in the lab together, just mandatory additional PPE to make sure that people were staying safe. And then we've been monitoring, doing in the background through HR some contact tracing, looking to see who's been hit. And across the sites, really no major blowouts of sections of our laboratory force due to COVID infections. So I think our strong reaction at the very beginning of all this really set us up well. Many of the practices that came online, particularly with mandatory mask wearing, we were already doing about a month and a half into the whole epidemic. But then in addition, I mean, the additional business we're seeing is related to pharmaceutical testing for COVID, and it's also related to sponsor labs who did shut down, who said, we can't do some of this other base work we were doing, we need your help in the contract research space. So we've kind of seen a double uptick in the amount of requests for our particular type of work. Lab sciences, my department has really benefited. Some of those labs they kept internally, they just outright shut down, and they said, we still need things to move forward. Can you do this additional testing in your groups? So we picked up some of that. We do have examples across Charles River directly supporting COVID therapies. So I mentioned the kind of novel testing that we developed in partnership with the innovator pharma companies. So there's messenger RNA in vaccine delivery systems, and multiple groups across Charles River have the technology to do those types of analyses. That's different from COVID positive testing. We also were setting up and starting to do those, particularly in our Reno and our Montreal labs. So we do different types of testing here. We've done some of the testing for COVID related therapies, and then generally just picking up slack where sponsors needed the additional support. I will also mention that we've seen a little bit of backlash on some of the international testing that was being done in Asia and India in particular. It seems like the COVID has really suggested, you want a trusted partnership with the labs that you are working with. So we have seen a little bit more return to mostly domestic sourcing of this work. So I guess that would be maybe the third benefit. But I'd say I think we've done really well. We had an earnings report from our CEO, Jim Foster, a couple weeks back. First half was really positive for the year. We're meeting targets. We are worried about some of the venture capital starting to dry up a little bit. And so we'll see if the demand continues or if we go through a little bit of a bump. A lot of this is yet to be seen, but so far so good. We're really happy with the way we've made it through so far.
That's great. Thank you, Beth. Aaron, with your business, working with businesses across, I'm sure, the Ashland area and beyond, what has it been like as a service provider working on technology issues? Can a lot of that and the work that you're all doing and seeing be done remotely, or has there been a lot of that kind of inter-office collaboration needed? And so just what it's been like on the small business perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sentec Systems has always been a remote operation. We've never had a central office space where we all met up and worked throughout the day. So we were well positioned coming into March to just kind of proceed as business as usual. What we saw, though, was an increased need for small businesses to be able to do the same. And luckily, we had already began to develop the infrastructures needed to roll these out, not only quickly, but in a secure manner. What we saw was an increase in users where typically, an owner or a director level person would have access to remote site and offline files and offsite files. We had to be able to grow that to accommodate for 10, 20, 30 users at times. And that leaves a whole variety of variables at play. First is how technologically savvy is the user? What is that home environment like? Is it protected? Is it safe? So we used what's called SSL VPN, so secure socket layer VPN, to just encrypt every bit of data that's in that stream back and forth between the remote site and the business. Another cool thing that we've been able to do is with our telecommunications side. We are a VoIP provider, so voice over internet protocol, and our phone systems are all in the cloud, which make it very easy to take even your desk phone from your desk, move it to a place, at a remote location, whether that's at your house or beach house or wherever you're at, really. Plug that into the internet and get access to your business phone, just like you were in the office. There's a variety of other things that we do with that phone system as well, like a mobile app that allows you to take that phone with you on the go. So our customers and partners, we're really excited to be able to have access to that. And now what we're seeing is it's not so much a requirement to do business, but our partners are seeing an increase in profitability and productivity because their employees are now having a stronger work-life balance. There's not necessarily all the commute to the office every morning. It's, come downstairs, get the kids ready, help balance with homeschooling and doing those various things. And they feel comfortable doing that because they know that they're secure and they were set up appropriately. We saw a slight lull in April as everybody kind of adjusted to what's next. But since then, it's really been a very, very busy time for us.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Aaron. One of the interesting things in hearing some of these answers thus far, and as we're a little bit beyond halfway through today's event, is the international work and just the connection that Ashland University and Charles River have, are, and again, Beth, you're part of a really large multinational company. Elad, you've built the connection between Ashland and the rest of the world and some of the MBA programs and business school offerings that you've done. But that's, I think something very unique and in a fantastic way, because Ohio, we're not a coastal city or coastal state where we have a ton of direct flights to Europe or Asia. I know that's something a lot of folks are working on, but just curious, and we can start with you, Elad, of just why that's been so important and what potential that has. And then also, I'm sure there's communities across not just Ohio, but the United States that can learn from cities and regions like Ashland that even for the size being more rural, do incredible business that spans the globe. And so we can start with you, Elad, and your perspectives and maybe tips for others that want to replicate what Ashland has been able to do. And then we can go to you, Beth.
Thanks, Chris. It goes to the foundational belief that I have and that business school has, that in an ecosystem, a successful ecosystem, you have a number of players. Obviously, government and civic are a huge contributor. To how you and I met in the first place. That connection and education. Higher education and K-12 feeding into it is a very strong player, and of course business and nonprofits. The point is, it's an ecosystem, and if you see yourself as that, and I think some universities don't necessarily, the ivory tower sort of cliche of just doing our thing and moving on. That doesn't work for a university and a business school like we have at Ashland University. We see ourselves. One of the things that I heard when I came to Ashland University 5 years ago, some folks would say it's the middle of nowhere. And I looked around and said, that's actually the middle of everywhere. If you look at how we're positioned, halfway between Columbus and Cleveland, not too far from Akron, we serve a large ecosystem and we pump talent into that ecosystem. And we also try to collaborate with all of the functions around to move forward. And one of the things that are critical for anyone that knows and has been in business for a long time is the international angle. So while we're focusing a lot on COVID, it really is a temporary situation that will resolve itself, and we'll go back not to a new normal, but what I call the old abnormal rather quickly. And that normal has to include, in today's business environment, has to include at the very least an international recognition and understanding. And that really isn't enough, but it's the first level of understanding. If you go to any class in our business school, undergrad or MBA, you'll hear about the global market, you'll hear about the flat world, you'll hear about globalization and internationalization. And it's important to understand how that works. And it's great to learn and read and watch videos about it, but it's not the same as experiencing it for yourself. And if there's one thing we know about Americans in general, and I apologize for the generalization, but in general, what we know is Americans don't necessarily travel a lot outside of the United States. And I'm not talking about a cruise to the Bahamas. I'm talking about actually exploring the globe. As much as Americans don't do that, Midwesterners do that even less. And so you would have a group, a growing group of students, a segment of students that keeps learning and hearing about international angles of everything they do, but not really experiencing it. And that's something we set out to correct. And so we launched this MBA program that has international study tours built into it. And it is, as you may imagine, one of the most attractive points for incoming students. Most of them, when you ask them, they tell you they've never traveled outside of the United States. Now, mind you, this is a graduate degree in business. These are folks that are at their youngest, late 20s, but go all the way up to their 40s and 50s, never traveled outside of the United States. Many of them work for SMEs, but many of them also work for international companies, and they've never really interacted physically with international markets. So that was something we set out to correct, and that was the impetus for what we're doing.
Thank you, Elad. Beth?
Yeah, and I just want to thank you, Elad, for what you're doing, because if it wasn't for high quality education, and Steve and Ben, your high quality education is what we're taking advantage of here in Charles River. In fact, I have a report who has just started his MBA program with University of Ashland. So kudos. We have to think in terms of international business angles from several different points of view. One is that since we're an international company, we have to present a face of one unified Charles River to our sponsors. And that means we constantly have to think about internally sharing best practices, things like our pricing models, the kind of service we provide. We want to look like one Charles River, but internally that's really challenging. So understanding the differences at each of our different sites and having strong relationships internally with the groups over in, we have Edinburgh, we have Lyon, France, we have Saint Nazaire, France. So we have really strong connections to try to make that all work. I think the second thing is we do also have business and sponsors that reside all over the globe. So we have to be very conscious of what are they experiencing in the way of their service needs, how do we provide them the support, how do we overcome things like basic communication, how do we continue to build on trusting relationships with them so that we continue to draw their work. They're actually a really strong component of our business model. To your point, Elad, understanding the market conditions and cultural differences, all of that is really critical for maintaining those relationships. And then lastly, we have to think about the market competition internationally. I did a talk for girls up in Kent State a couple years back, and I know they didn't like the message. I wouldn't like the message if I was sitting in the audience, but I said, you're not educating yourself to compete with the people in your classroom, nor across the state, nor across all of US. You are competing against students coming online across the globe. You have to think in terms of that level of competition and how do you differentiate yourself with your education. So they let me go without too much getting beaten up. But the point is that we do look at the Chinese competitors for what we do. They're on the rise. There's definitely companies and branches they have in the United States. And of course, in China, they're a much more closed market to the United States. There's a lot of backdoor handshaking with the government to just get anything off the ground. And that changes the way we can do business over there. And so we do have to navigate it very carefully. But even domestically, seeing the way that they pressure us with pricing and the type of service they're offering. I mean, you can look at these profiles online and see they're largely made up of the Chinese. You can look at their base company. I think like Tiger Industries is one of them that's back in China. And to be honest, I look at it closely and I worry about it. And I think we need to do more within Charles River to be sensitive to that competition. But certainly it's a global market, and that's where we reside. So that's the rules of the game. So we have to work on it. We have to be very aware of it.
Thank you, Beth. That was great and really fascinating. And as Elad and Beth have both mentioned, the importance of K through 12. And so going to Steve and Ben, and we have talked about how technology has helped just the process of education and the day-to-day learning. But curious as conversations amongst, and your colleagues at Ashland and across Ohio and probably beyond of the role that technology and educating students, that because when I went to school, we didn't have coding or developing or anything like that. And so that was something that I think a lot of people started to learn maybe in college or just through self-interest. But what is the role of tech and ensuring that students are, to Beth's point, they're not just competing against their 25 other classmates, but they're preparing themselves to be in a competitive global marketplace?
So I'll speak from a broader district level, and then I'll let Ben get specific with maybe some of the how the tech is incorporated at the middle school and high school level as kids get ready to expand into higher education. But our thought process from a district standpoint is that we need to get technology in the hands of students as quickly as we can. One of the eye-opening things is our state testing that we're typically graded on as a school district is not paper pencil anymore. And so just basic keyboarding for our little ones in our primary buildings, getting Chromebooks in their hands, and even as COVID hit, getting Chromebooks to their houses if they did not have that. We are well aware that students are a little more savvy at a younger age as they're getting cell phones and different devices of those of that nature. But the district as a whole, we're progressively getting closer to one-to-one. So we know the importance of having technology in the hands of our students. And as far as their savviness, I suppose the sky is the limit for every student, but what we offer in class form or different curriculum for the ability to use technology at a high level starts to ramp up in middle school, and then becomes obviously almost a concentration, if you will, when you get to high school, as some students of ours can move into a career center or a joint vocational school to work specifically on computer programming, those types of things. But our district progressively, day to day, gets more and more devices in the hands of students. So we understand the importance of those students understanding technology and their marketability as an individual and productive citizen as they get closer to graduation and move on to whatever their career path is going to be. So I'll let Ben talk a little bit about, because he was actually had curriculum that he taught that was based off of technology, but was an English class. So I'll let him speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so one of the things I think that we've done at Ashland City Schools really well is find out what kids are interested in, especially in terms of technology, and then try to help them develop that into what could be a future career. So for example, one of the things I know that we've done a lot with STEM, a lot with robotics, a lot with game design, those kinds of things. What Steve is referring to, I had 2 English courses that I had written and then I had taught. It was technical reading and writing through games. And so we use video games, board games, and VR to teach English. And so it was kind of a unique situation. Once again, the idea was to find what kids were interested in, especially in terms of technology, and then help guide them in ways to be able to use those interests for marketable skills, or for them to even be able to dig deeper into what really interests them and to see kind of maybe what's behind just the immediate surface level of what they might like about it. And so as a district, I think we've done a pretty good job helping guide students that direction.
Thank you, Steve and Ben. And as we have just about 8 minutes or so to the top of the hour, we'll do our final kind of go around here with a question that we like to end a lot of these events on. And so we can start with you, Aaron, but kind of a two-part. One is if someone's coming to Ashland, passing through, visiting, maybe for the first time, where should they go? It could be a coffee shop, it could be a place to eat, it could be one of the parks. So that's been something fun. We've heard different stops in different places all throughout Ohio. And then the second part of the final is anything you want to add just to wrap up, or some type of prediction that you're seeing. It can be in technology, it can be Ashland specific, it can be more broadly, but just kind of a fun way to end this. So we can go Aaron, and then Beth, and then Steve and Ben, and we'll wrap up with Elad.
All right. Yeah, so whenever anyone comes into town to visit, I've always got to take them to the Grandpa's Cheese Barn. That has got to be one of my favorite stops in Ashland. I always end up spending a lot more money than I planned to. I say, oh, let's go try all the cheeses, and maybe we'll get something if we see something we like. And I come out with 3-4 cheeses, beef jerky, all sorts of different things. And then, of course, we've got to go to Sweetie's right across the way there. And what I see coming down the pipeline for technology, really just kind of evaluating the trends. Back when I was in high school, I think it was less than 9% of people were on the internet. And now here in 2020, that number is over 60%. The so-called Internet of Things has drastically increased, and computers are becoming more commonplace in our everyday lives, right? This is a computer. This is a computer. And now with all the work that they're doing in the automotive industry, our cars will soon enough be computers. And that's why I'm excited to hear all the innovation happening in our education system, because there's going to be an increasing demand for technicians that can support these devices. So, obviously the technology is important, but the skills that they're teaching, critical thinking, research, the ability to learn, those things are all important. I can't wait to see where we're at here in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you, Aaron. Beth?
So since the COVID situation arose, more outdoor dining has been big on my list, and I am immensely grateful to Shanks. You can sit out on that patio. You got a view of, the 9th or 18th hole, I guess. I'm not a golfer. And I swear, every time I go, I think if this was in Columbus or Cleveland, it would be mobbed. You wouldn't be able to get a seat out here. So I'm so grateful for those little delights, and Fireswoods for my park for sure. One of the big things we're working on right now, it's really just arose in the past 9 months, is data mining. So Charles River has all of these data points that we collect, but they're not collectively pulled together in a way that we can mine them for the benefit of understanding our business, understanding our clients' needs, anticipating the future direction we need to go. So there is an initiative that's actually doing that. And they talk about the data lake, they talk about nomenclature and harmonizing it so that we can actually move across databases and pull the data together. And then Power BI is one of our biggest tools that we're all moving on to now to do visualizations of that data. Knowing your data, using it wisely, mining it for the purpose of your business is really hot right now. And so I'm excited to see where that goes.
That's great. Thank you. Steve and Ben.
So we're going to give our shout out to Uniontown Brewery, downtown Ashland. It does have a small alley for outside dining, but it was a dream of a couple individuals, and they took an old furniture store and put an awesome place to eat and get some beverages of your choice. But it's a really cool hang, and if you're coming through right downtown on Main Street. Ashland is got a motto of Ashland Rising. So a lot of the storefronts and businesses downtown are changing, and new things are opening, and it's exciting. And kind of talking with Ben, one of the benefits that we see moving forward is we have now become attractive to those individuals that may have been homeschooled, or the social element of school was very scary for them, or for whatever reason, maybe you're in a county school and they just don't quite offer the curriculum or the electives that you would like to get into. And the ability to have us having a remote platform to offer those courses makes us a lot more attractive to more people. And the more we continue to grow our organization as far as students, because let's face it, that's the most important thing in our district, I think the better. So I think our teachers have become more adaptive, and our students will be more adaptive. And I think that's only, I guess, good core values to have, is to be adaptive, especially now. So that's where we see things going.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Elad, you want to take us home?
Well, at College of Business and Economics at Ashland, as we like to call it, COBE, we learn by doing. Our students learn by doing, and so our finance students have state-of-the-art Bloomberg trading room. Our fashion merchandising students produce fashion shows and learn by doing. And our entrepreneurship students are managing a cafe inside the building, lovingly called the COBE Cafe. And so they're running a small business as they're studying entrepreneurship. And so that would be my recommendation to you. If you drive by the beautiful DAB building, come inside and go to the COBE Cafe, interact with our students, get something good to eat. Everything's great to eat at Ashland University. As you probably know, we're nationally known and ranked for the food and the quality and the taste and everything that has to do with our dining services, which are just phenomenal and top notch. In terms of predictions and anticipation of the future, as I already said, I think this crisis, just like any other crisis, will come to an end and produce a lot of opportunities. But what concerns me and what I work on every day, and circling back to the entrepreneurship side of things, I think our industry, higher ed, is ripe for, and it's already happening, huge disruptions. And so we will see, and if we don't do it ourselves, it'll be done to us. We will see a construction of the academic degree, especially beyond the undergraduate degree. So the undergraduate degree and the social element of being on a campus, I think, is never going away. I think students at that age love it and want it, and I think it's going to be great in a variety of ways. But lifelong learning, upskilling, jumping from one job to the other, which is the norm, and having the ability to be credentialed and do things that are beyond your academic degree are already happening. And if we as higher education don't do it ourselves, it's going to be done to us, and we might find ourselves completely disrupted and out of business. Sorry to be so pessimistic, but on the other hand, it's also very optimistic, because I think we have an opportunity to do that, especially because we still have the massive majority of the customers, i.e. students.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you to Beth, Steve and Ben, Aaron, and Elad for joining us today. We're right at 1 o'clock, and want to thank everyone who's tuned in. As I mentioned, this is the 9th of our 10. So next week in Dublin is going to be the final event of this tech tour. But thank you to all of our participants and attendees today. I want to finally thank HMB, the tech tour sponsor. They've made this entire series possible, which has been so fun hearing about incredible work in places like Ashland today. You can visit hmbnet.com for more on them. But lastly, as a final, just want to say thank you for everyone again attending, and our panelists for all the work you've done and sharing it with us today. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great day. All right. Bye all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.